Well, hello everyone and welcome to Moementum channel. My name is Mo, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the Smith Maneuver. The Smith Maneuver is a technique that can be used by Canadians who are homeowners who have certain criteria to actually tap into the equity of their home and reborrow that fund to invest. And through that, they could have more leverage in ways of building a portfolio, investing more rapidly, in the hope and goals of reaching that financial independence and financial freedom. But there are some risks associated with that, which is why in this video I'm gonna be sharing my own experience. I've been using Smith Maneuver for the past 1.5 years, and this video is actually inspired by one of the posts that I was recently tagged on Blossom. One of my friends over there actually tagged me. And in this video, I want to share with you what are some of the lessons that I've learned, how did I get into Smith Maneuver, and do I regret that decision or not? Thank you, 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝐖𝐊 for tagging me on this post today, and it kind of inspired me to actually go ahead and make this video, talk a little bit about my own experience. But you might be asking, what is a Smith Maneuver? For me, I had to do a lot of research on it when I got into it about 1.5 years ago. This goes back to December of 2021, a little bit more than 1.5 years ago. And I first heard about it through a webinar that I attended, whereby there was this mortgage broker who's a Smith Maneuver certified professional talking about it, how he has used it in the past here in Canada, and what are some of the advantages. But to just give you a little bit of in a nutshell what it is all about, Smith Maneuver is a technique that allows homeowners to kind of convert the debt that they have on their home, that mortgage debt, into a good debt. And let me elaborate by that. As you know, here in Canada, for the most part, when you have your own property, your own principal residence that you're living in, the interest rate that you pay on your mortgage is not tax deductible. You cannot reduce it from your taxation, unless perhaps there are unique cases. Maybe if you were to rent out a part of your home or whatnot. But let's say you're not doing that and you're just staying in your home as your main principal residence. You don't have any rental income from it. Then in that case, all the money that you pay to the banks as an interest is pretty much gone. There's no tax deductibility to it. With the Smith Maneuver, you have the option to actually make that into a tax deductible type of debt. In other words, for lack of a better term, you're turning that bad debt into some sort of a good debt. What happens over time then is, as you pay down your mortgage, because you have the right set of product, you have a Smith Maneuver type of approach to it, by having a re-advanceable mortgage, you get to reborrow the amount that you paid down for your mortgage. Essentially, you are going to be able to reborrow that the principal amount that you paid it down. So over time, as you pay down your mortgage, you reborrow it back, and the kicker is you have to then use it to invest. So you borrow to invest. And based on that approach, as long as you're borrowing to invest, and it has to be some sort of a kind of acceptable type of investments by CRA, such as stock market, let's say, or rental properties or things of that sort, then it is becoming then tax deductible. So at the end of the year, you kind of jot down and calculate all the amounts that you paid as interest amount to your new lender. Let's say you got this Smith Maneuver re-advanceable mortgage from, let's say, Scotiabank or MCAP or whatever financial institution. As you're borrowing that money to use that to invest, you're then now start to paying some interest for that borrowing to your new lender, right? And that is the amount that you can calculate it and add it up at the end of the year and claim it as a tax deductible cost, because you borrow to invest. And I'm going to show you some examples of my case. Like, as I mentioned, I started this in December. Pretty much we started borrowing it as of January of 2022. And hence we are now in 2023. At the time of making this video, we already have filed taxes for the past year. So I can show you how much interest I paid, and also transparently show you my own portfolio and how far it's come since the past 1.5 years or so. Is my holdings doing good? Do I regret it? What are some of the things that I learned and some of the do's and don'ts? But I just wanted to put it out there what the Smith Maneuver at a nutshell is. A few things for you to consider, a few kind of do's and don'ts. The first one I would say is very important. You should have a principal residence. The second piece to that is that you have to have at least 20% of your home down payment done. If you have less than 20% equity, you cannot opt for readvanceable mortgage. That's the minimum requirement for that. The three is that you have to have a readvanceable mortgage. This is different from just having a home equity line of credit on the side, because with a home equity line of credit, for the most part, yes, you are able to borrow certain amount, up to certain amount for your home, but they're not readvanceable, meaning as you continue to pay down your mortgage, you're not going to be able to borrow more. So it's just going to have a cap. Whereas with a readvanceable mortgage, like the one that I have with Scotiabank step mortgage, as I pay down my mortgage, that portion gradually becomes available and I can reborrow it, as I wish. I don't have to reborrow it, but I have the choice to, if I want to kind of maximize my Smith Manoeuvre portfolio. So those are some of the things for you to consider. What else I can share with you? Yeah, the other piece that folks have to pay attention to is that you have to borrow to invest. You cannot borrow this amount from your readvanceable mortgage, the HELOC attached to it, and then go and buy a car or go buy some materialistic items. That's not how it's going to work. It's just going to totally stop the tax deductibility of them. It's so important that you actually end up investing it. And for my case, what I've done, I pretty much used that money to invest in the stock market. When I started my own portfolio, I went ahead and decided that I want to buy into an ETF to make things simple. So most of my holdings at the beginning was into Vanguard All Equity ETF, V-Equity, VEQT. Over time, I decided to actually add, explore a little bit with different type of holding. At one point, I added shares of 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝐿. It was one of those holdings that give you monthly dividend income. But then the more I did some reading on it, I figured out that it might make things more complex and complicated to some extent. I decided that, you know what, forget about it. I sold my shares of 𝗖𝐋𝐈𝐿, I think at some minimal profit, if not, and then reuse that and pretty much bought back into the shares of V-Equity. So right now, my portfolio, as I would be showing you momentarily, it's fully invested in V-Equity. And here it is, my portfolio that I have. And for my Smith Manoeuvre portfolio, I'm holding it with Questrade. The reason I'm not actually investing in this portion and this account with Wealthsimple is that, unfortunately, Wealthsimple right now does not allow having more than one non-registered account. And for me, for those of you who have been following my journey and my channel, Moementum Finance on YouTube, you know that I have a pretty much large portfolio invested with the Wealthsimple Trade account. I have a large non-registered account, and I don't want to confuse it with my Smith Manoeuvre. For the sake of clear taxation and tax reporting and CRA, I just want to keep my Smith Manoeuvre portfolio separate, just so that I know exactly what money has been put in, how I can reuse that to invest, because it's so crucial. I don't want to mess up with anything CRA related. And that's why it's currently kept at Questrade. If at one point Wealthsimple allows having more than one non-registered account, there's a high chance that I would actually be moving it and transferring it to Wealthsimple. I just love Wealthsimple's simplicity and how it makes things super easy for me. But anyway, back to our position here. I have selected time frame of since inception. You do see that this portfolio started with around $68,000 invested or so. Over time, I borrowed around $37,000 or so from my Smith Manoeuvre, from my line of credit attached to my readvanceable mortgage. This is an important point that I want to elaborate here. My wife and I, we had our principal residence initially at one point mortgaged with MCAP, and we were very happy with it. MCAP is a wonderful financial institution that we were happy with. But as we learned about Smith Manoeuvre, we decided, and that's a good point. We actually decided, we didn't have to do it, but we chose to kind of end our mortgage with MCAP earlier. We incurred some prepayment penalties because we wanted to start with this Smith Manoeuvre journey sooner. That actually incurred some costs for us. We ended up paying actually close to $1,500 in prepayment penalties, and as well as some administration fees and whatnot, because we ended our mortgage early. Understandably so. This is how financial institutions also try to keep you locked down to their terms, and if you choose to kind of end that term early on, those are some of the costs that you have to pay. We figured out at that time that it's going to be still beneficial. We did the math. We looked into the Smith Manoeuvre calculator that our certified mortgage broker showed us. We played with some numbers, put some estimates. And at that time, the more interest rates were a lot lower. As you know, this was before the interest rates hikes started to begin. I believe at that time, our borrowing rate was perhaps hovering around that 3% or so, a lot lower and nowhere close to what we are paying right now on our Smith Manoeuvre. The home equity line of credit attached to it, the rate is covering close to that 8%. In fact, it's prime for Scotiabank plus 0.75 percentage point, like 3/4 of a percentage point, which is massive. It comes closer to that 8% borrowing rate. And you can appreciate how things have changed drastically over that time frame. And then the next point that I want to also bring to your attention is, what was that $68,000 then you saw in the beginning? Well, because we had paid our mortgage with MCAP for a while, we had already built in some equity in our mortgage. We did want to actually accelerate our Smith Manoeuvre portfolio. So what happened was that we ended up actually transferring the entire amount and proceeds of our mortgage settlement to actually Scotiabank, which included almost that $68,000 that you saw there as our own equity that we had built in our funds. That was pretty much our own money. So we used that and pretty much contributed it right away to our investments that we have, and we kind of reborrowed it at a much lower rate. In this case, at a lower rate to reinvest and actually to buy these shares of the stock market. What I'm trying to essentially allude to this fact is that the portion that we are paying such a high fee on, like in that 8% or so, is only that $37,000 or so that we have actually borrowed after the fact from our line of credit attached to our Smith Manoeuvre readvanceable mortgage account in this case. So currently this balance of our account is sitting at $108,207. It is overall showing a total currently positive profit of $6,500. But you do also notice here that there's a total profit and loss of only $4,000. So, and that shows a simple rate of return of close to 4%. Where that comes from is that at one point, when I had shares of equity with Questrade, there's a little bit of a complexity sometimes to it. You may accidentally, go through it, and I actually did happen for me. One time I was trying to buy shares of equity, and instead of just buying one share, I ended up going with the default. I think they had a default of 100, and that kind of messed up the entire calculations. So, and at that time and it actually went through because this is almost like a sort of considered like a margin account. Questrade didn't bother to let me know, hey, you don't have the funds here. No such thing. In fact, it went ahead and bought those shares for me, which is why we ended up then right away selling it almost at the same market price. That's where the kind of the loss comes in, because at the time that I bought and sold, I was already at a negative balance. Long story short, I guess where I'm going with this is that the more accurate number here is this return for my portfolio, which is 4% ever since I opened up this account, and it's showing to be up by 4,100. You do notice that our entire holdings is in V equity. I have a total of 2,992 shares of V equity, and V equity only pays you a dividend distribution once a year. Usually it's paid in January. I think it hovers around that $1,500 to $2,000 in dividend income based on the number of shares that I have. Let me share back now a little bit more details around the back end. All right. Now, I started borrowing as I mentioned, as of January, gradually, January of 2022. And that's when I started paying the interest to Scotiabank for the amount that I'm borrowing from my line of credit kind of attached to my the readvanceable mortgage. This is, you see how gradually the amounts increased, and then it started interest rate gradually to grow over as well. So in 2022, I paid almost a total of close to $700 in interest. So far this year, in the first 6 months alone, I've already doubled that amount just because the interest rates have gone up so much. With that, I'm not really borrowing a lot more at this point. I'm not touching it. I'm just waiting and letting my money hopefully grow the way it is, the amount that I've already borrowed in V equity. You see, and V equity was doing actually quite well. And just letting that sit. If the interest rates over time come down, I will possibly resume this whole Smith maneuver. But for now, given that the rates of borrowing are so high at 8%, I don't think it's worthwhile for me to reborrow. It's really going to be hard to try to beat that 8%. There's some, I would say, positivity here too, is the fact that let's go back to what we said earlier on, that ability to kind of turn your bad debt into good debt. In this case, that $37,000 or so that I talked about, it's been already part of my mortgage payments that I reborrowed, and now I've actually over time been able to turn it into a good debt. It's tax deductible as I'm borrowing to invest. Like, for example, this $700 or around $700 that I had, this was a portion that I claimed as interest for investing, and the portion of it, let's say if you go with the 30% tax bracket or so, around 30% or so of it, it was paid back to me in terms of refund, which I then took back and put back into my mortgage if I wanted to, right? So that way you can accelerate your Smith maneuver even further. For those who are interested to learn more about Smith maneuver and how you can maximize it, ideally in better interest rates environments, there are some, I think, resources out there that I highly encourage. I started reading the book Master Your Mortgage by Robinson Smith. He has also a website, this book, Master Your Mortgage for Financial Freedom. He also has a book. He also actually has a website called smithman.net or smithmaneuver.com. I think he made the short version because not everybody can spell out Smith Maneuver the way that he is, but smithman.net is the easier one for you to refer to. And when you go here, there are some really good resources here. And he, in fact, has some have podcasts, some discussions with other folks that have interviewed him before. There are a set of videos that he has talked about the Smith Maneuver and accelerators with Darren Voros. I really think those are some of the really useful resources. I will try to add the link in my YouTube video description if you want to check that out as well. I think this is very informative. Now, going back here, what I've seen here so far, if I add up the entire interest amount that I've paid so far, it comes up to a total of $1,900 Canadian, roughly. This is based on the amount that I borrowed, actually, which was $37,000. Given that I had almost around 3.94 or let's say 4% interest on this amount alone that I borrowed, if I was to earn that 4% total return, that would have equated to the earnings of close to $1,400. Okay, that amount is not actually enough even to cover the interest paid that I've paid so far for it. But keep in mind, if the interest rate were a lot lower than it would have been a way better circumstance. This is really due to the fact that interest rate kind of ballooned so quickly out of nowhere and really made things a lot worse. And I add to that, in fact, the $1,500 that I did mention earlier, the prepayment penalties and reinvestment fees that I had to pay through MCAP. All in all, at this point, it does seem that my Smith maneuver was not a success, but it's been only 1.5 years. The interest rate environment has changed drastically. So many things kind of played a part here. How I'm going about it is I'm trying to, as I indicated, stay almost put, not put any new money and reborrow from my Smith maneuver at this time. Wait until the market situation gets better. If you are interested in pursuing Smith maneuver, I definitely encourage you to do your research. Definitely go and try to read that book, Master Your Mortgage for Financial Freedom. I think gives you a lot of inputs into what it is and more specific nuances to Smith maneuver. Of course, keep in mind the writer is Robinson Smith. He's an advocate for this technique. So, of course, take it with a grain of salt, but I think he's done a good job in trying to showcase with examples why this could be a good technique for those who have the stomach and have the willingness to take some additional risk to it. The other thing I would encourage you is that also, if you are going to pursue it, I think it's advisable you pursue it through a Smith Maneuver certified mortgage broker, because a lot of times banks don't have a clue what this is all about. In fact, even our Scotiabank that we went ahead and actually ended up signing up for the step mortgage, the folks that were kind of advisors and were supposed to give us information, they themselves, even at the time of signing, they're very confused. They're wondering, why are you borrowing? Why are you actually borrowing from your line of credit? Because it doesn't make sense. It's so high interest rate. Why are you doing it? And for them, it didn't make sense why we are borrowing to invest. I think they don't have, and I'm not trying to generalize, but I think many it seems like many advisors that at least I've come across have no clue or are not really knowledgeable around Smith Manoeuvre, which is why I think it's best if you consult somebody who knows what they're talking about, have done it themselves, and at least that way they can show you the best way and the best key consideration to take into account when you're signing up for a mortgage. Because the last thing you want is you want to get a mortgage and it's not even the right side of mortgage, and you're not set up accurately or with all those key considerations that needs to be taken into account. And maybe if you have a mortgage that have few years before it's due for its renewal end of term, maybe hold on to it for the time being. For us, if the more interest rate had stayed low, it probably would have not been such a bad idea that we prepaid our mortgage and paid the penalty. But now, probably given the hindsight that we have, I would have probably waited and not have to pay. There wouldn't have been so much rush to actually pay the fee and try to switch to a readmissible mortgage. And had we waited, at least we would have seen this high of an interest rate environment. But again, you don't have a foresight. You can't envision what's going to happen in the future. It's all something that out of your control. Luckily for us, we are in a good financial environment. Personally, as a family, we are okay with it. We are able to pay the interest rate. We're just having to mitigate our approach and kind of adjust it, not reborrow anymore, because we don't want to put ourselves into a difficult situation that is not needed for, or take more risk than what is required at this stage for us. We'll see how things go. It's been an update around 1.5 years, as I pointed out. Perhaps I do provide another set of these updates, maybe in several months, and let you know if my thoughts have changed at all about Smith Manoeuvre. If you have any question, please let me know on Blossom or on YouTube. You can follow me on Blossom with my handle Moementum Finance, and on YouTube you can find me with the same thing, Moementum Finance. It's a channel that I have on YouTube, and I'm very passionate about the topic of finance and investing, and do post quite frequently over there. I would love to have you follow my journey on YouTube as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching this video until the end. I hope you found it beneficial, and hopefully it gave you some idea of what Smith Manoeuvre is all about, and if that's something that you may want to pursue or something that you want to perhaps learn more about. Thank you, and I hope to see you all next time.